That cheesy grin is me, and that thing in my hand, well, that is a first winner's trophy. But this trophy is not the story here. This is the final chapter of our guide to racing your first rally, and we're telling it through the journey of my return to rally riding. In case you missed it, a few days before this story starts, we hit a snag. That snag is called a French border guard, and between him, Boris, and the confusing rules, we were definitely going to be late. I do find that arriving on time for a rally makes things a little smoother, but what are you going to do? We arrived in Olympia for Olympia Rally at 4 a.m. after a 3-hour drive from the wrong ferry port on the morning of the race with a half-built bike and way too many empty Pringle cans. Back in episode 1, it seemed like the bike was all ready to go, but the reality was more like this. The first step of any rally is the paperwork, the registration, and the scrutineering. This stuff typically happens in the days preceding the event, but you know, this guy and everything. My bike was still not wired up, my graphics needed fitting, and I had a Stanley blade incident that meant my bike still had smears of blood on it, but the less said about that, the better. The process of registration is really quite simple for Olympia. They check your paperwork is all in order, you pay a deposit on the MyTrack tracking system, and then you fit that to your bike. This is followed by the scrutineering part, where the organizers check your bike isn't going to catch fire or explode, they check your helmet has the right sticker, check the noise from the exhaust isn't obscene, and make sure you have your little safety equipment pack with you. Fitting that GPS tracker is just a case of adding the wires to your fuse box and praying to the gods of electricity. Beyond that, the scrutineering is a relatively straightforward process as long as your bikes haven't been left in a hole to rot for a few years. The first stage of most rallies is kind of like an order sorting formality, essentially a qualifying session. It'll be short, it won't be too difficult, and it's mostly just to organize the order for the first full day. Like always, this is definitely the stage where almost everyone tries too hard, they ride too fast, and they forget to read the road book. Future me should really take my own advice. It's very good.
Exciting, adrenaline, it's so slippery, I haven't ridden gravel like this on an enduro bike. 1.5.
Now remember my sound advice from 15 seconds ago? And there we go. I missed that turn. From then on, it got progressively worse. I missed that turn too, and then I tried way too hard. I got confused, I was tired, I got really lost.
Really?
Eventually, after riding in circles for 20 minutes, ending up back at the start, I found Dad also lost, and he found the right turn. The rest of the stage was incredible, super fun. Some further sound advice for rallies: read the damn road book. It's not there for fun, and you will not go any faster by trying to ride harder. You'll just get lost. Ride slower, go the right way, and I promise you will do very well. The prologue today was incredibly nice. It was a really enjoyable ride. It's a nice way to start an event like this, to not have to bust out a massive day. At the end of the stage, there was a little cafe there. It even said in the road book, go to the cafe and have some food. So we did, and it was peachy. It's day 2, and today I'm gonna hopefully explain to you a little bit about how the navigation works. I didn't do a great job of the nav yesterday.
Is it this way? No?
And today is a much more mellow day. There was a bit of an incident yesterday on a piece of road, the road section. The organizers cancelled the stage and allowed us to follow the original route as an untimed ride. The concept of navigation for rally is really simple. The tricky part, what makes it difficult, is the executing it while trying to ride a bike. And the faster you try and ride, the harder that gets. However, it is a skill. Like any skill, you can learn to be better. You put some time in and you practice, you will get better. I don't do that. so I'm still pretty crap at it. The first and the most important tool for nav is your trip meter. That's in the top left, and it shows me how far I've traveled. At the start of each section, I set it to 0, and it records how far I'm traveling from the speedo on the front wheel. I can adjust and correct for any variation in the distance traveled using these buttons on the handlebars here. I use that information to then read the roadbook. The roadbook is this paper scroll that I'm unrolling here, and it has all of the directions on it. Those directions are marked with distance so that when I've traveled a certain distance, I should follow the instruction. In the other two boxes, we have that directional information and additional detail. You may hear these boxes called tulips, but I don't know why. The roadbook is super useful as a safety tool too. It contains a lot of danger information about the trail, like this caution here. You'll also find info about the actual terrain, which helps with getting caught out and makes the whole process a lot safer than it is without a roadbook. You advance the roadbook manually using this little thumb switch. Typically, you want at least 2 rows of tulips showing so that you can see the upcoming instructions and attempt to retain some information about them. At least that's the basic premise. For the most part, roadbook marking isn't necessary. The roadbooks now come pre-colored, which is a wonderful development in roadbooks. The main roadbook work you have to do are corrections and additions. Each day the organizers share some updates or some pages to add into the roadbook. Sometimes you write them in, sometimes you have to cut and tape the new pages in. When it comes to reading the roadbook well, there are some really helpful tips. I touched on one of them earlier, but the first is to slow down. I am terrible at this when I haven't done any roadbook reading for a while, but you want to try and ride at a speed where you can actually read every note and retain it. If you can't, you will make mistakes, miss danger markers, get lost, and potentially hurt. It is also worth noting that paper roadbooks are finicky things. Remember when I missed those turns on the first day? That happened because the paper was rolling on its own and I didn't realize. You can see it in these 3 clips that the 2 notes disappeared before I reached them. I have in the past mostly ignored the last digit of the trip distance on the roadbook and my ICO, but here in Greece the navigation is very precise. Typically the system of roadbooks is actually a bit inaccurate to be getting hung up on every single meter being accurate. It takes a lot of brain power to remember over hours and hours of riding too. However, for Olympia, I found it important to constantly make sure that the ICO was perfect at every single junction. And so when I'm riding, every time I get to a junction that is clearly just for checking that your trip distance is right, I make sure it's bang on when I go past it. So if there's a side road, it's bang on. And every single obvious junction I get to, I make sure it's really precise. And for this race, that was quite transformative of me making quite a lot of nav errors and being a bit unsure of where to go and doing a lot of riding in circles and losing a lot of time. To being really precise and much better with my nav. Lastly, don't follow other people. They are probably wrong. I try to be confident in my decisions by reading the roadbook as best I can. Getting lost is also part of the process, and I think it's kind of cool. It's not often you're so lost in life you couldn't find yourself on a map, and for me, that's an enjoyable part of the process. When you get lost, if you're not sure why or where the roadbook and you went out of sync, the way to solve it is to go back to the last point you know was right, reset the trip and start again. But make sure if you do this, you ride slowly. You're riding against the traffic. Be sensible. It's more than 5 years since I last rode a rally, and I can tell you I was pretty damn rusty with the navigation. I made the same mistakes I made on the prologue and that I'm telling you not to make. It's kind of silly, but that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Me and him are racing, but we're doing it trying to average 40 k's an hour, or just not exceed 40 k's an hour.
I went fast, I went the wrong way a lot, and I passed the same 3 people repeatedly all day. I really struggled to find the concentration on the navigation. However, the day was superb. The riding was very fun and very varied. Because we've come to Olympia on our own, and we haven't got a mechanic, at the end of each stage, we do need to do a little bit of work on our bike. And the process for this kind of rally is pretty simple. It's not complicated. These rallies aren't particularly tough on your bike. They're mostly like enduro riding all day. So you're not gonna burn through parts. You're not mashing through chains and sprockets. I'm gonna end up just using less than one set of brake pads for the whole race, even though we're using the brakes a lot. And so the life is pretty simple. Mostly the days are checking your bike through and then doing a few simple bits of maintenance. The one thing that does happen a lot on these rallies though is that the bikes get shaken about a lot. There's a lot of bumps and rocks and so on, so parts vibrate loose, and it's really important to check them constantly. Especially I find the roadbook stuff, you have to check that because it's up a long way, it's getting vibration through the handlebars, so I always check that those bolts are tight and Loctited properly.
Each night when we get back from riding, I have a little list to run through, and at certain points the bike will need extra maintenance. The quick check over takes around half an hour-ish, and the more major works depends very much on how much shit-talking, beer and time wasting you engage in. I always nut and bolt check the bike. It's so crucial to avoiding problems on the stages and is worth every second it takes. In that same category is torque checking the crucial bolts. If a bolt coming out is going to ruin your day, check it. It's worth creating your own list of these checklist items, and I'd recommend making sure the torque is correct on the forks, the wheel nuts, the handlebars, front brake caliper, and double checking the levers, gear lever and brake pedal. You also want to check the road book every day. I promise you something in there is desperately trying to fall off your bike. Next is the brake pads. Check your split pins and that there is plenty of material left on the pads. Check the chain tension, and after every stage the bike gets a new air filter with the lip grease. Because it's extra dusty, I've used the KTM filter skin on most stages and it's brilliant. Keeps the filter really clean, and I was often just able to wash the skin and refit it. Because my KTM 350 suspension was brand new, the rear spring also settled in each day, and I ended up regularly checking the sag. It moved after each full stage and needed redoing. Lastly, we come to the more major works. I changed the oil filter after 15 hours of racing, which was just after halfway in Olympia Rally. On top of this, I changed 3 rear tyres and 2 front tyres, but used a single set of mousses for the whole event. The Pirelli mousse lube was insanely good and a key part of being able to do this, and the mousse never came close to drying out. As for the tyre choice, the front mid-hard felt pretty good, including in the wet, but I found the terrain in Olympia wasn't actually hard enough for it. Dad was using the mid-soft MC360, and that's probably a bit better tyre. It doesn't last quite as long, but it seemed to be more grippy and more consistent on the trails.
There a few people come through.
Like 4 bikes.
4, I think.
Yeah.
So hot in this thing.
Day 4 is done, and it's been a monster. It's kind of, I think my stage time today was 5.5 hours, 260 kilometers of incredibly varied, very, very enjoyable riding. Some tarmac sections, a little bit transit tarmac in the middle. While it's sunny now and very nice, 3 hours ago, it was like being in Wales in the middle of winter. The fog was so bad, I couldn't see 10 meters away. It was driving rain. And having the right kit when you're in this kind of environment is really important. For me, it's not so much just a brand thing. It's more about having some principles of what you want your kit to do and choosing the stuff that fits you well.
Rallies are remote, helicopters don't work in a forest, and nature needs respecting. I make a lot of my choices for kit based on the need to be incredibly self-sufficient. Starting from the ground up, I like to wear high-end motocross boots. Safer, stronger, and just a good idea. I'm a fan of good hinged knee guards, and good chest and back protection is a requirement. I did use this older Scott plastic one I've had since I rode Dakar, but I've since moved to Liat Airflex, and it is a big improvement. One thing I really consider in this conversation is heat. Greece, Spain, or any desert in summer or autumn is hot. Racing in 30 plus degrees C is not to be ignored, and kit should take that into consideration. Because of that, I mostly wear Enduro or MX style kit with a body warmer. I do enjoy having trousers with a pocket, even just for an extra energy bar. For more complex rallies, a vented jacket works really well, especially when you need to be in the wilds for longer periods. For Olympia, I wouldn't bother, but for Dakar, I wouldn't ride without one. On my back, I use this Krieger Trail 9. This backpack is a great product. It's tough, has some storage, but isn't huge and doesn't bounce like crazy. I've also used the hands-free drinking system that on a personal level, I cannot race without. I'm a sweater, and being able to drink little and often really keeps dehydration to a minimum, and even so, on the long days like this stage, I still use the 3-litre bladder I had squeezed in. In the back pouch, I carried my little packable waterproof too, which is part of your compulsory safety equipment, and I'm very glad I had it. I always use earplugs to ride too, and for rallies, I find they help me concentrate better over the day. I combine that with the best helmet my budget will allow to, and some goggles with a high contrast lens if you can. They can be expensive, but they really help. I've also found over time that chrome lenses seem to get dust stuck on the inside much more than non-chrome ones, and that sucks. So try and avoid them, even if they look much cooler.
It's the morning of day 5, second last day. Another decent sized day today. It's going to be at least 4.5 hours riding, I think. Pretty excited. Yesterday was amazing. The views here are tremendous. They're starting a little bit further forward today, which is, it's a bit nerve-wracking starting at the front because you don't have the safety of checking your mistakes against people that know what they're doing a little bit better. So it's quite a vulnerable place to be, really. Much easier starting further back and having some tracks to go in.
At the start, I was pretty aware that the 3 riders in front of me were better than me. Svitko has finished second at Dakar. Tobias Ebster is insanely fast compared to me, and so was Michael Smits. However, speed isn't always everything.
Up here? Yeah. A wild first 20 minutes. We've both made, well, I don't know if we made a mistake in that first bit. It was just hellish complicated. Well, we did, but it was hellish complicated, and the man in front of me that beat me yesterday appeared out the trees, and he's faster than me, so I let him go in front, and then he went the wrong way and I followed him. Then we got it right, and then he wasn't sure, and that is rally in a nutshell.
We played a little game of cat and mouse for the next 40 kilometers as I kind of tried to stay in touch, but I really didn't have it. I ended up on my own again and kept ambling through the stage. I love how in rallies like this, it feels so old school. No factory fuel stops, just a chill Greek guy in a gas station.
Full. Busting for a pee. I have the bladder of a child.
A guy on a scooter saying hi, and an entire mountain to yourself. My GoPro ran out of battery at the top, but honestly this track over the mountain was insane. It took at least 20 minutes riding hard to get to the top, another 15 to get back down, and I couldn't help but keep looking at the view. Somehow I ended up back in front of Michael, playing that same game of cat and mouse. He caught me back up slowly over the stage, and it made for one hell of a fun ride. He finally made the pass stick late in the stage and pulled away, but after 230 kilometers, I ran into the finish with a very fortunate third place on time, a desperate need for fuel and some food. On these longer days, even if you're in good shape, I've found that I think it's quite important to look after your body, to make sure that you're on top of how you're feeling and the energy that you're putting in. Even though they're more chilled out compared to enduros, it's still a lot of riding at a decent intensity, and it's easy to mess yourself up. I'm averaging like 135 for the whole day, peaking around 160, which is about 80% of my max. According to my heart rate monitor, that's kind of about 2,000 calories. I'm far from a triathlete or a sports scientist, but this is what I've learned. Over 3 to 5 hours of riding, you probably want to eat some food. I eat a bit while I'm riding if I can, and on this stage I had an energy bar in my bar pad broken up and a banana in my back pocket that I ate on one of the road sections. It's probably still not enough calories compared to your output, but it does make a big difference. You can also use energy gels, and I highly recommend the Buzz Power honey-based ones as they're way easier to eat. In my Camelback, I use a basic carb mix, either an SIS Go style powder or a mix of honey and salts. Combining that with the hands-free kit does keep you in pretty decent condition over the full event. After each stage, I also think looking after yourself matters a lot. I'm as keen as anyone for a post-ride beer, but do not underestimate eating and rehydrating. I make a recovery drink after the long stages, and I find for me it makes a big difference. On top of that, most of the time you ride through lunch, so simple, easy to eat carbs are a really big help. After this stage, some pasta, sauce, and cheese got the job done and helped me be ready for the next day. We have both made it to the final stage of the race. We're both upright and in one piece. Now, I'm sure you're dying to hear about how that stage goes, but before we get there, I've got one more rally riding tip that we really need to cover. Knowing what to carry in your tools is a really difficult thing because you could take everything. You could take the whole garage with you, but it's not a nice experience to do so. So the way I try to build my toolkit is to have the minimum that I need to fix things that are going to fall off. In a race like this, if your tire comes off the wheel, it doesn't really matter. Like, the organizers will come and help you solve that situation. For this reason, I use the smallest kit that I can. I also make sure the critical big bolts are perfectly checked each night, and I can accept the risk that something could go wrong. You can, however, carry a tire lever with a spanner attached to it to cover the wheel bolts. Everything else should be solvable. I do on bigger rallies, but I am less stressed on carrying a tool like that here. My toolkit is based around this mini Motion Pro chain breaker. I then took this neat little Baco SL25 toolkit, stripped it out, and made it fit inside. That covers most of the bolts on the bike and the chain braking. I include a single link for repairing the chain in there too. On the forks, I keep a multi-tool. This is a Gerber one with a few knives, some basic screwdrivers, and some pliers. On the other fork, a cable tie, a handful of cable ties. With those and maybe a small amount of duct tape, I reckon you can solve most problems you'll face in something like Olympia. In the airbox, I stash a few cam buckle tie downs in case I need to tow or do some towing, and they have served me very well in life. I also carry a spare ICO cable and a main fuse for the bike, as those have both got a little habit of breaking, and that is it. You do not need to carry anything more than that. The last stage of most rallies is typically a little shorter and easier, but off-road team, and specifically Doc, the organizer, this guy, likes to make things interesting, especially with the navigation. The stage was only due to be about an hour to 90 minutes long, but that's if you found the way. Now, after 5 days, I'd found a rhythm with the riding and the nav. I was having a ton of fun and taking these very lightheartedly. I was due to start the day third after the ride yesterday, and basically I just had to make sure I went the right way and it'd be great.
nearly, I repeat, nearly achieved that with a couple of tiny mistakes and one medium mistake that saw me ride through a small museum. But the mistakes I did make were less than the others, so that's a win. To cap this amazing week off, the final stage of the rally rolled back into the town of ancient Olympia, right past the original site of the Olympics. That's me right there riding past the stadium. It is easily one of the coolest things I've ever done in a bike race, and it's amazing to have had that experience. After a week of riding, working on bikes, eating pasta, editing video, and not sleeping enough, I learned a ton about myself, the process of rally riding, and where the gold in this all lies. Olympia Rally has been great, but completely not for the reasons you'd expect. I did win a trophy. It was in a class I didn't know I was winning, and while the trophy is nice and it sits well in the garage, that's not been my story here. I found an event that's social, friendly, and insanely relaxed. I came with zero ambition, but to make some good videos, not have any big crashes, and left with a trophy and a hard drive full of good memories. Turns out, as cool as Podium Pie is, it's the memories of riding with good people, talking shit in the evening, and seeing an awesome part of the world that I care more about. And Olympia, you have been one hell of a place to do that.